This. We're late. We have a very serious discussion that we need to have. Many of you have still not picked an honors presentation topic. We still need to lock those down, and so I hate to pull out the stick, but we got to get this done. Okay, so Thursday is the hard deadline. Okay, so I'm going to have to be that kind of guy. Anyone who hasn't locked down their topic, come by my office and lock down the topic by Thursday. I'm going to take points off, okay? How about we say a 10-point deduction on the project for anyone who hasn't come by and locked it down? I think that's a fair penalty since Friday was the actual deadline, so you have until Thursday, right? So come down or come by and we'll lock it down, or 10 points. And a locked down topic means in my office, or I have actually said, okay, I have your name written down and it's locked down. Okay, that's the way it works. You have a question?
What unit was your office again?
G112. It's just right outside and down the hall, just right here. Okay, so just step out the door, turn right a few paces, and you'll see me G112 before you get to the learning lab. So a few of you have kind of brainstormed a little bit after class, and I think that's terrific. But I have to have your name written down on my paper in my office in order for me to be certain that we have something good. And I'm completely open-minded in terms of what we do. It just has to be a topic that sort of has no exact perfect answer to it, right? Not a research paper where you're explaining something, but something along the lines of, I'm not going to let you do this, but something along the lines of, was Alexander a liberator or a conqueror, right? You know, he can be described as either, really. You know, something along those lines. You know, were the Greeks a bunch of racists, or were the Greeks simply a product of their time? That sort of thing, right? You know, how do we judge them? That sort of thing. You will present this and you will sort of explain how this argument could be seen both ways, but then you will, in your presentation, explain why one side is accurate and one side isn't. It doesn't have to be super complicated. What I really want to emphasize here is that this is just a learning exercise, okay? I'm not going to be the Gestapo in judging you. It doesn't have to be something that comes out of Hollywood. I just want you to record yourself giving a presentation, something that you would something that you would present to people. I'm not going to give you a bad grade if it's not perfect, okay? I want you to practice. I want you to learn how to do this. That's kind of the whole point. I want y'all to not stress too much about it. One thing that I always tell my students is that your other classes are hard enough, okay? I don't want this to be a class that you stress a whole lot about. You are here to learn. You are not here to be stressed out. That's always the way I want my students to see my classes, okay? So go into this with the idea that you're going to try to make this project good. You're going to put effort into it. And if I look at this project and I see that you did put effort into it, I see that this is something that you genuinely tried to do, I'm going to give you a good grade on it, okay? I'm going to say, yeah, you know, he or she tried. And I think that that's great. And what will happen is I'll review it. We'll talk about it. You'll get a good grade because you tried, right? Because you put genuine effort into it. We'll go over what you did well. We'll go over what maybe the shortcomings were. And then when you take my class next semester, you can do another one and you can improve on maybe the shortcomings from this one, and then you can do a better job, right? You see where I'm coming from, right? You can pick up where you left off, and then later in the future, you'll have a skill set that will almost certainly be applicable in the real world, because I think we can all agree digital media is where things are going, right? Digital media is where it's at. I will be giving a presentation in March, two actually, at a tech conference. And that tech conference will include me getting up, being recorded on video. I'm giving what you're giving in March at a tech conference at the Beau Rivage. And I can assure you, when I was a student, this was never something that I ever thought that this would be, that I would be doing. And history guys are not tech nerds, but it turns out I've got to be one. So that's all that this project is. It is an exercise. So don't let it be something that scares you. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not scary. Anyway, we got to keep going. When we left off, we were talking about Rome, and Rome was now a dominant force. I want to introduce you to a new word. We talked about sovereignty. Did we talk about the term sovereignty?
Last thing we talked about was like extreme poverty and like the
Yeah, extreme poverty. There's a couple of words I want you to learn. A couple of terms, because these are terms that just kind of come up. Whoops. Not spelling as well as I should. You don't have to write this down necessarily, but sovereign is a very important word that you need to know moving forward. Sovereign simply means independent, okay? A sovereign nation is a fully independent nation, okay? The United States, Mexico, France, England, we know what a country is, right? Sometimes the word state is used in place of a country. So if I say a sovereign state, what I mean is a sovereign country. So the United States is a sovereign nation. England or Britain is a sovereign nation. France is a sovereign nation. Mexico is a sovereign nation. Is Mississippi a sovereign state? No, because Mississippi is a state within the United States, right? But we answer to the federal government, don't we? So we're semi-sovereign, we're quasi-sovereign because we govern ourselves, but there is a larger government that we answer to. You see what I'm saying, right? When you're children, you're not sovereign individuals because who's in charge of your life when you're children? Your mom and dad are, right? And so you kind of are bossed around by mom and dad, and for a good reason because you're children. You're not, emotionally and intellectually equipped to be fully sovereign as individuals. But once you turn 18 and you become adults, legally you become sovereign. You're now your own person capable of living on your own. So sovereign simply means independent. Another word I want you to know is hegemony. Hegemony means dominant, okay? Hegemony has to do with power, okay? If something is hegemonic, what it means is it is powerful. It is the big kid on the playground is the hegemonic kid on the playground. Okay? Hegemony is power. That's the easiest way to put it. You can look up what that word is in the dictionary. And after Rome had defeated Carthage, Rome is now exercising hegemony within the Mediterranean space. Meaning Rome is exercising power over everyone else. If you're in a group of people and one person is sort of the boss over everyone else, and y'all have kind of been in those groups where one person is clearly dominant over everyone else, y'all have seen that. That one person has hegemony over everyone else. That's what the term hegemony means. So when you see that in the world, that's kind of, the chieftain of the tribe, the chief holds hegemony over everyone else. That's what hegemony means. Well, Rome had hegemony over all of the other peoples within the Mediterranean after the defeat of Carthage. But, as we mentioned earlier, there are very real problems. Everything okay?
Just going back.
There are very real problems here because there's tremendous corruption, there's tremendous problems. The Senate really doesn't control. Oops, I got the wrong notes. The Senate doesn't really control the generals anymore. They're off conquering whomever they choose. There is infighting within the army. There is infighting within the Senate. Political assassinations are now happening all over the place. Two brothers known as the Gracchus brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, at one point tried to resolve this, but that doesn't work. They both end up getting assassinated. And now we've got a very real problem because even though Rome is immensely powerful, it is like a train that is going off the rails. It is like a train that is going off the rails with generals conquering on their own. And ultimately, whoever has the power, whoever controls the military has the power. And this is the expansion of Rome. Here are two maps that show the expansion of Rome. You know, we start with the control of Italy, and it just eats up more and more and more territory. Three men are going to emerge. Three men are going to emerge that take advantage of the situation. One is Crassus. One is Pompey. And finally, there is Julius Caesar. These men are all immensely wealthy, powerful generals. And I am definitely simplifying this story for the interests of moving it along. They command very big armies. They are themselves very wealthy. They have already conquered a tremendous amount of territory. And they conclude that if they work together, they can control Rome, because they control the three largest armies, and there will be nothing that the Senate can do. There will be nothing that the Senate can do. And the Senate has become so corrupt, the Senate has become so ineffective, that they conclude that actually Rome would be better off if these three strong men, if we three men just simply come together and take over the Senate and reestablish order and control using our armies. By some measures, some historians argue that Crassus was the wealthiest man that has ever lived. Well, the Senate is, of course, deeply concerned about all of this. The Senate is deeply concerned about all of this. And it gets particularly bad, and this is happening over the course of a few years. Crassus controlled an army over here in Asia Minor, and Rome was conflicting with an empire over here called the Parthian Empire, which I'm not getting into. It's effectively the Persian Empire at that particular time. And Crassus ended up getting killed in battle. Crassus ended up getting killed in a battle, which put Caesar and Pompey as really the two men that mattered. And we all know that Caesar's really the guy that's going to make a difference here. Caesar was already a very influential national hero in Rome. No phones, please. Caesar was already tremendously popular and wealthy. He had conquered Gaul, this region here, which we generally know as present-day France, although big chunks of present-day Germany also included. The borders are sort of murky. The Gauls were seen by the Romans as barbaric. They were definitely not culturally Roman. They're up in the north. They're not Mediterranean people. And conquering the Gauls was a very, very challenging campaign. Many people had considered it impossible to do, and Caesar had pulled it off. And it opened the door for the Roman conquest of Britain as well, which Caesar was also able to sort of do. And it made Caesar just a huge national hero, on the level with Scipio, who had, of course, finally defeated Hannibal. And at that point, Caesar could have just simply retired and been a big hero, and that would have been the end of it. But Caesar had bigger ambitions, as obviously we know. Caesar, of course, has no interest in cooperating with Pompey at this point. Caesar wants to rule it all. Caesar wants everything for himself. There is a river in northern Rome, and we're not actually sure which river they were talking about, although we have some ideas, but in northern Italy. And it is a river called the Rubicon. It is a river called the Rubicon. And the Senate was so concerned about Caesar's power and the strength of his army and the popularity of Caesar, and they were so immensely unpopular, that the Senate passed a law that any army that crosses the Rubicon, any army that goes south past the Rubicon, is immediately guilty of treason. Just, if you march an army past the Rubicon into Italy proper, you are guilty of treason. So every man in that army will be executed. And the whole point is, if Caesar moves his army south into Italy, he is clearly there to take over the Senate and become a dictator. Now, an earlier general had actually done this. An earlier general, a general by the name of Sulla, had actually done what Caesar was on his way to do. About a generation or so earlier, a general named Sulla had overthrown the Senate with his army, become dictator. Sulla ruled Rome that way for a few years and then retired before someone assassinated him because he was smart enough to know how these things tend to work out. Caesar, not so much, but... So the Senate knew this is not necessarily an unprecedented event. So Caesar marches his army to the Rubicon, and as the legend has it, this is obviously not entirely backed up with primary resources, but he turned to his men and said, you tell me, do we cross the Rubicon and march on Rome? Or do we turn around and go home and retire now? Because obviously we're already victorious, we're already heroes. We could just quit and that'd be the end of it. And now he's going to face Pompey. Pompey is who the Senate is going to send against him. Pompey has an army of his own. Pompey is weaker, but nonetheless still there is no guarantee of victory. And this is sort of one of those issues that deals with the human psyche, doesn't it? Do I quit while I'm ahead, or do I go for the gold, right? I'm already kind of doing okay, and so do I wimp out and, take the, do I take the consolation prize, or do I take the big risk and go for it all? And so legend has it Caesar turned to his men, because again, if we win it all, but of course if we lose it all too. And Caesar's men, as legend has it, told him, we're marching on Rome. And so they crossed the Rubicon. And there's a term that is used, not so much anymore, but it's kind of an older term, that when you have a very big, risky thing to do, and there's that point where you have to make that decision, metaphorically, you are crossing the Rubicon, right? I don't know if any of you have ever been skydiving, right? But if you're in the plane and you're standing and you're looking out the window and the parachute's on your back, once you step out of that plane, there ain't no going back in the plane, is there? Right? And so that's crossing the Rubicon, right? If you're going to make a big business deal and you don't know if it's going to work out or not, but man, I don't know. This is a big deal. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it'll won't. Well, once you sign that contract, that's it, right? You've pulled the trigger, so to speak. That's crossing the Rubicon. And some people are like Caesar, and they have that personality where they're willing to take those risks. Some people don't. And some people are not willing to step out of that plane and cross that Rubicon, and that's the life that they choose to live. And some people are like Caesar, and they'll take those risks. At the end of the day, it's kind of a personality type. And that's the kind of guy Caesar was. But anyway, Caesar crossed the Rubicon. He marched on Rome. The Senate sent Pompey to try to stop him. Now, I am definitely simplifying the story here, but Caesar marched on Rome. He did defeat Pompey eventually, not immediately. Caesar conquers Rome and becomes the dictator. And this was in 49 BC. This was in 49 BC. Once the dictator of Rome, the Senate had no choice but to cooperate with him. The Senate had no choice but to be his friend. The Senate had no choice but to be his friend. Now, Caesar did not cut off the heads of his enemies or go after the people that had opposed him. There were certainly plenty of people that did. All Caesar Caesar did was demand loyalty. And he turned to the rest of the Senate and said, as long as you are supportive of me now, I won't take any vengeance against my opponents. I understand y'all were, in a different position, but I am now the dictator. I am now Caesar. Not only will my name be used, but my title. I am now the dictator of Rome. And Caesar was very popular. He used his power to regulate food prices. He used his power to keep the streets safe and clean. He used his power to create public works projects, to build roads and bridges, and that gave plenty of jobs to poor people who needed work, plus it's good for infrastructure. Caesar was a popular guy. Caesar was a popular guy. And for 5 years, so far so good. In 44 BC, legend has it, and this is probably a little bit more accurate, although their calendar is certainly very different from our calendar today. On March 15th, the Ides of March, Caesar went to the Senate to meet with some senators. Now remember, Caesar holds all of the power, but the Senate still exists. He was surrounded by men who he assumed were his friends. But of course, what happened? They shanked him. That's one way to put it. That's exactly right. They surrounded him, and 10 senators stabbed Caesar to death. After 5 years, Caesar was assassinated. They wanted him gone, and so they got rid of him. They wanted him gone, and they got rid of him. The most legendary assassination in human history, the murder of Caesar.
Do we know how many times he got stabbed?
Well, at least 10, right? And these were all high-profile senators. The best known was Brutus. All of these men, of course, wanted power for themselves. Now, William Shakespeare, the English playwright who we've all heard of, saw this as a great topic for a play. And so, in the late 16th century, he wrote the play Julius Caesar. And like all drama, he took, on historic topics, he took a lot of liberties. He changed the story some. He changed the motivation of many of the characters. In the play Julius Caesar, the senators were kind of honorable men who were killing Caesar to save Rome as a republic, to try to prevent Rome from becoming a dictatorship. The reality was these were not good men who were trying to save Rome. These were men that were trying to get power for themselves. And it kind of opens the door for an interesting discussion, because most people now think of the story of Caesar because of Shakespeare's play rather than the actual history. And so the play has become what people think is what really happened. And that's kind of scary, because we go to the movies and we'll watch a movie based on a historic event, and a lot of people think that's the real history. A lot of people think that Hollywood is telling you the real story, and at some point that becomes the story that people think really is true. And so Hollywood directors end up becoming the historians, and I'm not so sure that I like that. On the one hand, we want people to become interested in history, and movies and drama are a great way to do that. That's been the case since the ancient Greeks. On the other hand, everybody going to the movies needs to go in there understanding, I'm not getting the real history. Are y'all following me? You need to understand what you're being told is extremely biased and manipulated and not true. There's an awful lot of liberties that are taken. Ever since that movie came out, 300, everybody thinks that, the Spartans and Xerxes, everybody thinks that that movie is somehow the way it was. It is not. That movie is way off in a lot of ways, right? But everybody seems to think that the movie 300 is somehow a representation of how the Battle of Thermopylae and what was going on with Athens and Sparta is somehow true. But I can assure you the movie 300 is not anywhere close to the actual accounts as told by the ancient historians. As a matter of fact, much of what happened we don't even know. But in any event, what you have to understand when you go to the movies is those historic events are often very different from what the movies show. Because what's Hollywood interested in? Money, right? And they're going to change the story, not only to make money, but they're also going to change the story to align with our own present sensibilities, right? They're going to change the story to make us feel good or to tell the story that Hollywood would like to tell rather than to tell the real story, right? Because the real story might not be what we're comfortable with today. You know, the hero in the story might not have been so heroic in real life, but they don't want you to know that, right? The person that they're trying to make look good might very well have had an awful lot of flaws, but that undermines the point they're trying to make. That's frequently what is the case, right? Or the bad guy might not have been such a bad guy, right? The real story might be far more nuanced, but that doesn't make us feel comfortable. That would not put butts in the chair in the theater if they had to tell the real story, right? You know, Gandhi wasn't nearly as Gandhi-ish as we would like him to be, but we all want Gandhi to be this wonderful person, right? You know, Martin Luther King, they don't really talk about all the cheating on his wife when you go see the story about him, right? They tend to leave that part out, if you get where I'm coming from, right? And so we don't get the real story because they want to prop up historic characters or bring down the bad guy or leave out the stuff that makes us feel uncomfortable. So you need to study real history. You need to study real history. Anyway, moving on. Moving on. I want to stop there because I want to show you some stuff from this era that we find interesting. Here is what a typical Roman soldier might have looked like. As you can see, a Roman uniform for a typical Roman legionnaire would have been very expensive, very, very well built. This is why the Roman armies were so effective. They learned a lot of this from the Greeks, only this is taken to a much, much higher level. They understood that a well-equipped army, a well-trained army, is going to be much more effective, right? All of this is, when we say a uniform, the whole point there is that each one is identical, right? Something that is uniform means that each soldier is the same. That's why it's called a uniform, right? Think about what that term means, right? The idea is maximum mobility with protection, right? Those shields are designed to lock in place, right? You see where I'm coming from? And when they would go on the battlefield, they didn't fight as individuals. They fought as units. And they would have men with flags, and they would raise different flags to tell the men to get in different formations, right? And they would have men yelling different formations. This is one, for example, called the turtle, as you can see, right? And so if the enemy is shooting arrows, they would say, the turtle, and they would all immediately get in this position and that position. And like I said, ancient battles are often very different from what we see portrayed in Hollywood, to make that point that we mentioned earlier. It's generally armies pushing against each other, not, Game of Thrones, all whacking and chopping, right? It's who can shove the other army out of the way, right? Very, very highly trained. They put huge amounts of energy into training and discipline. Every single man has to stay in formation. Tremendous amounts of punishment. I mean, if you break and run, if one guy falls out of place, the whole formation collapses. And so if you chicken out, you're executed. Okay? I mean, if you chicken out, that's it for you. As a matter of fact, the Romans invented something called decimation. Now, deci means what? In the metric system, what is 10? 10, right? And so if a unit didn't fight properly, or if a man in the unit chickens out, they would execute every 10th man in that unit as punishment. That's what decimation is. As punishment to that unit if somebody in here does not perform properly. And so everybody understands, I had better not mess up, because the entire legion depends on every man doing it. Now imagine thousands of men doing the turtle all at once, right? That sounds like a dance, right? Do turtle? I don't know, right? And of course, they learn it from the garden gnomes or the Greeks, right? Like I said, they learn these formations from the Greeks. And over the centuries, remember, Rome was around a long time, the Romans are going to adjust their battle tactics. They don't use the same battle tactics over the centuries. They adjust to the changing times, the changing technology. It is extremely complicated. There we go. Here's Caesar. There's several different busts of him. We know exactly what he looked like because he had his figure done many times, his likeness. So we know exactly what he looked like. Here is his assassination as painted during the Renaissance. Obviously, his painting of his assassination was not done during his lifetime, but, you know, dude getting killed, there we go. This is really cool. Roman figures, the powerful men in Rome, the leaders would often print coins as propaganda, When a new emperor would come to the throne later on, we'll see, they would often print coins. After the assassination of Caesar, Brutus actually had a coin printed for his own soldiers, to pay his own soldiers. This is the holy grail of collectible coins. This is a coin that was actually printed to celebrate the murder of Caesar. This is known as the Ides of March coin. And this is Brutus on the front, and then this is the murder of Caesar on the back, and it is the Ides of March, and the cap represents freedom, and then, of course, the murder. There's only a handful. And he said the gold version, I think there's only like 2 gold ones, and there's only like 5 or 10 of the silver ones in existence. But I think that's kind of cool that there is, in fact, a murder of Caesar coin. And this is celebrating. Brutus had this printed to celebrate his participation. And there was absolute chaos after the murder of Caesar. All of the different assassins then suddenly are in a big power struggle for who can take over Rome next. All sorts of different civil war now breaks out. Eventually, there are 2 men that are fighting for power. After several years of chaos and conflict, 2 men are fighting for control, and they are Mark Antony, Marcus Antonius. We will call him Mark Antony. And that's Antony, not Anthony, Antony. And here he is. He had a coin too. We'll mention old Cleo here in a minute. Let me see if I have a picture of Octavian. And Octavian. Mark Antony had been Caesar's right-hand man. He had been sort of his prime minister or chief advisor. And Octavian was Caesar's adopted nephew. Antony was Caesar's chief advisor, and Octavian, was his adopted nephew. So both men were in very strong positions. And the other assassins ended up getting theirs and were out of the picture after a few years. You know, the power struggle that ensued ended up taking out everybody else. So we don't need to get into them. Brutus and the rest of them. Antony's power base came from the military. He had a very large number of soldiers and legions. He was particularly popular with the military because of his connection to Caesar. Immediately, the army got behind him. And the murder of Caesar infuriated the military, of course, Caesar being the military man. And and Antony teamed up with Cleopatra, who we've all heard of. And there she is. Yes, we do know what she looked like and who she was. She was the descendant of one of Alexander the Great's generals. She came from the Ptolemaic family. Now, you were instructed to read about this on your own, but they were a Greek family that ruled Egypt. So Cleopatra was not really Egyptian. Cleopatra was not really Egyptian. Although her family had ruled Egypt for quite some time, it is believed that she was the first of them to speak Egyptian, so that's good. But up to that point, the rulers in her dynasty didn't even bother to learn the language. Here she is as a pharaoh. You can see the cone head crown, interacting with the gods. Here's a tablet with her. Here's a coin, and then there's a bust of her, and then but was she really Egyptian? You know, I guess you can just sort of decide for yourself. But she came from this Greek family that really honestly never interacted with the Egyptian people. You know, the royals are very much in their own place, and the Greeks again had this better than everybody else attitude. So in any event, now Caesar and Cleopatra had already been a couple, and they even had a child together. And Cleopatra was very intelligent and ambitious herself. She was not comfortable even being queen of Egypt. She wanted to sort of rule Rome in her own right, and that's why she hooked up with Caesar. And supposedly she had the ability to seduce him and bring her under her spell, so to speak, which is where that legend comes from. You know, her ability to seduce men and make them sort of do whatever she wanted. Now, the reality was Caesar was no fool. Why would Caesar want to have this connection with Cleopatra? What does she have that he wants? She has Egypt, and we talked about this before. What does Egypt have? Gold and grain. So it doesn't matter what her powers of seduction are, okay? You know, she's not a particularly attractive woman. She's not ugly or whatever. She's very normal looking. She could look like the Bride of Frankenstein. Who cares? She's got gold and she's got grain. So Caesar is going to think she's wonderful because she can feed his army and pay his army. This is a political arrangement. That's what these things are. That's what the leaders and the royals and the people in power do. They make deals. And when Caesar was assassinated, Antony saw Cleopatra for what she could offer. Yes?
Weren't they like trapped in a library for like 6 months?
Well, they ended up getting trapped. Well, we'll get to that. Yes, that's the thing. Now, again, a lot of this is kind of speculation, but the sources do explain this. So when Caesar was assassinated and all of this power play stuff is going on, Antony saw Cleopatra and Cleopatra saw Antony for what they could offer each other. She can feed and pay his troops, and he has the army to conquer Octavian and take Rome, basically pick up where Caesar left off. What did Octavian have? Well, Octavian had the Senate. As it turns out, the Senate did not trust a foreigner. The Senate did not trust an Egyptian. Now, whether or not her being a female is part of the deal, probably it did not matter. But the truth is, an outsider having influence in Roman business, no deal. And so that was the mistake. Yes, Cleopatra is very wealthy and powerful, but she's not Roman. She's not Roman. And Octavian turned to the Senate and made it clear Octavian is teaming up with an outsider, and we cannot allow an outsider to be controlling to be controlling him. And to be honest, that might have played a big role in why they killed Caesar to begin with. That might have played a big role. We've got this outsider that's telling Caesar what to do, and Rome is never going to be ruled by an outsider. And so the Senate turned on Antony, and eventually the Senate raised a new army, and this idea of patriotism, this idea that Rome is ruled by the Romans, and this foreigner, this outsider, is controlling Antony. We love Antony. Sorry, he's under the spell of an Egyptian queen, ended up being his downfall. Octavian sent a message to all of Antony's men: if you join me, nothing bad happens. You can rejoin Rome, you'll be welcomed back, and you will once again be seen as true Romans rather than turncoats who have joined the Egyptians. And Antony's men took the deal and abandoned it. So now Antony is with the Egyptians, and he's an outsider. Antony and Cleopatra lose, Octavian takes over, and that's the end of that. Antony and Cleopatra are said to have committed suicide. Great dramatic story. Elizabeth Taylor makes a blockbuster movie, and here we are. Octavian declared himself imperator. Now, this was not the first time this title had been used. It was a military title. It was a military title. Hey, everybody, I'm in charge now, but first, pull my finger. What would be a more modern version of imperator? Emperor. He is the emperor of Rome. And this took place in 27 BC. Rome is no longer a republic. Rome is an empire with an emperor. And Rome will have an emperor for the rest of its existence. So Rome has now transitioned from republic to empire. Rome has transitioned from republic to empire. And Octavian is emperor number one. Caesar is not considered an emperor. And other men had declared themselves imperator. For example, Brutus declared himself imperator too, but he is not considered an emperor, even though he had called himself that. Lots of men had sort of used that title to command troops, but Octavian is emperor number one, according to the historians. Rome will continue to be powerful and wealthy for a very long time. This is the Roman stamp, SPQR. Now remember, the Romans are speaking a different language. In Western Rome, they would speak Latin. In Western Rome, they would speak Latin. So even though the letters are what we would see today, it is a different language. It stands for the Senate and people of Rome. And they stamped this everywhere they went. If you are under the Roman umbrella, you will see SPQR on all of their infrastructure. Their legions carried it. They stamped it on everything they built. This is their seal, SPQR. You are in Rome when you see SPQR, under the rule of the Caesars. And the title, Caesar, is what we call the emperor in a generic sense. He might be Caesar, Octavian, Caesar, Gludius Maximus, Caesar, whatever. But he is Caesar in the generic sense. And that term will be used to describe a lot, like, for example, when the German Empire is created, he will be called the Kaiser, which of course we know is Caesar, whatever. Octavian creates coins too. They all create coins. Here is a coin that Octavian would create. And this is again in 27, he becomes it. Hold on, just chill. This is Octavian. And on the back, we see Pax Yes.
With the other coins, like made by the other, like Caesars and all that stuff, would they like devalue after?
They would. What matters? A good question. What matters is the gold content. And so whatever's on the coin doesn't matter. It's how much gold and silver is in it. And so good question. So you don't care who's on it. Again, it can be Emperor Gluteus Maximus, but if it's the gold, hey, I'm happy, right? And so great question. Anyone know what pax is in Latin? Peace, right? And so yes, I am now the emperor, and I am in charge, and I am the boss, and you're going to do what I say, and I am taking away the power of the Senate. Rome is no longer a republic. You are giving that up, people. I am bringing you peace. We have had decades of turmoil and chaos and corruption, armies running wild, all of this terrible stuff. You are giving it up for peace. And everyone in the empire will see peace on the back of their coins and me on the front. So who is bringing you peace? Octavian is bringing you peace. And it worked. And it worked. Octavian will be a popular emperor because of that. Now, Octavian would just laugh every night. Yes, you have stripped away all of their rights. I'm keeping them fed. I'm keeping them safe. And behind the scenes, they do not care what I do. They don't care what I do with their money. They don't care what I do with their laws. Those people are too stupid to care about anything else because I keep them fed and I keep them entertained. Right? They can sit their fat butts on the couch and watch Netflix and eat cheap food. And behind the scenes, we just do whatever we want. They can shop at Walmart with their big old butts pushing their carts through the aisle. And they don't even know who is passing the laws, much less what the laws are. So what do the people need to do? The people need to start paying attention, don't they? The people need to start voting. The people need to start knowing who their lawmakers are. The people need to start paying attention to who's passing the laws and what the laws are, because those laws affect the people. You don't buy into the propaganda that says, don't worry about it, I'm going to keep you fed and happy and peaceful. You got to pay attention. But anyway, that's a different conversation. We're out of time, I know. You got till Thursday, folks, so come see me about your topics, please. Don't turn me into the bad guy. I'll see y'all later.